Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Please spare us a couple of minutes. We'll start the webinar in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Please give us a couple more minutes. We have a batch of attendees joining in today. All right, then. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome the Colliers Project Leaders team to the webinar, Navigating Joint Capital Development, a Roadmap. Today, we have 4 presenters who will share their insights on this topic. Colliers is one of OECM's awarded supply partners under the Facilities Project Management Services Agreement. For more information about the services or the agreement, please contact Colliers or OECM at customersupport@oecm.ca or call 1-844-632-6900. Without further ado, I pass the floor over to Colliers team.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Navigating Joint Capital Developments, a Roadmap for School Boards. We are excited to have such a diverse and knowledgeable group of participants with us today. So as we delve into the complexities and opportunities for joint capital developments, our goal today is to provide you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and a platform for meaningful discussions at the end of the presentation today. Whether you're a seasoned professional or this is new to you, we hope you'll find today's session both informative and engaging. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We'll ask that you keep your microphones muted during the presentation, but we invite you to use the chat feature to submit your questions, which we'll be tracking throughout. And there will be an open forum for discussion at the end of the webinar. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather today. Colliers Project Leaders has offices across Ontario. We acknowledge that our work takes place within ancestral, traditional, treaty, and unceded territories, which continue to be home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We continue to benefit from our presence on these lands and are committed to reconciliation. So I thought I would kick off with a quote that many of us on this call would resonate with: funding. But funding is only part of the challenge. With evolving political landscape, the shifts in leadership, changing policies and directions, and the persistent issue of funding, joint capital projects offer a great opportunity for schools, private developers, municipalities, and other players in the community to team up and build the strong communities that Ontario is known for. Colin Best, past president of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, put it so well. He said, building communities is much more. It's about so much more than just housing. Getting the key players in our communities to collaborate to build the infrastructure that make complete communities critical for Ontario's prosperity and quality of life is very important. And building communities is what is at the heart of the work that we do here at Colliers Project Leaders. Our experience supporting school boards and municipalities across Ontario puts us in a unique position to support this mandate and help connect the dots between schools and communities looking to build together. So allow me a little bit of time to tell you a bit about our organization. Colliers Project Leaders is a Canadian company with over 30 years experience in providing a wide range of services on projects across a broad spectrum of sectors, from healthcare and large municipal projects to transit, long-term care, infrastructure, and educational projects. We're particularly interested in education and the municipal sector, and we've been privileged to serve several school boards and post-secondary institutions and municipalities across Ontario and all of Canada. Building and shaping communities is at our hearts, is at the center of everything we do. Our experience supporting school boards helps us to do this effectively. My name is Ugo Chris-Aluta. I'm a project manager with Colliers Project Leaders. Over the past 20 years, I have delivered projects in the public and private sectors. And at Colliers, I'm supporting clients in the K-12 sector on municipal projects, higher ed, utility, and energy sectors. On the panel with me today is Matt Steele, who is currently navigating to active joint build projects. Matt?
I'm doing pleasure meeting you. Happy to be here today. Matt Steele, I'm with Colliers, very similar to Ugo, project manager on the team, actively supporting clients, all of which are going through a joint build process at varying degrees of progress and all finding success in our strategy, which is exciting. And we're looking forward to going through that today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Rory, our subject matter expert, brings specialized experience in education and other public projects. He'll tell you a little bit more about himself. Rory?
Thanks, Ugo, and thanks for hosting us, Ronald. We really appreciate the time. Good morning, everyone. Rory Tuite. I'm a principal at Colliers Project Leaders. I have the great pleasure of working directly with Matt and Ugo. They are the brains behind the operation, and we're lucky to be joined with such an expert, Ron Spina, as well. So looking forward to the discussions today. I'll be supporting the team, but happy to be here. Thanks, Ugo.
Thank you, Rory. Our panel today is completed by Ron Spina, whose 30-year career includes several exciting projects, including the iconic Canoe Landing project, one of the joint builds we'll be looking at today. Ron?
You're on mute, Ron.
Sorry. Thanks, Hugo. That's quite an impressive introduction. Anyways, thank you everybody for inviting us here today. Really happy to be here to share some insight on these types of projects. My personal experience is mostly with municipalities where there's a number of stakeholders involved. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you on how we can assist you in the future. Back to you, Hugo.
Thank you, Ron. We thought we'd kick off the discussion with a definition. I was in school not so long ago, and definitions always set the tone for the subject matter. Joint capital developments, despite the big name, is just a collaborative approach where different entities such as school boards, municipalities, private developers can come together to develop infrastructure and other capital assets. These partnerships are essential for sharing costs, maximizing benefits, and improving public services. There are several examples. You could have two school boards, a Catholic board, a public board, come together to build a single facility with classrooms and then share services such as a gym or a library. You could also have a community and one school board or two school boards come together with shared funding and agreements to develop a community center, a library, or other facility that is important to the heart of the community. These collaborations and resources help to reduce duplication of efforts and maximize value for every dime, every dollar that is spent on public infrastructure. And this strategy is not new. It's backed by a Ministry of Education mandate. In 2023, the Ministry of Education introduced joint capital developments, amongst other new measures, to foster greater collaboration between school boards and the communities in which they reside, to ensure planning and construction of schools is targeted to ongoing future growth. The school boards and municipalities looking to optimize available funding and develop shared community resources are encouraged to come together and work together. But how does this look in real life? In real terms, what does this look like? What frameworks are available to guide prospective community collaborators to take advantage of these opportunities, to avoid the confusing pitfalls, maximize available funding, and navigate their way to project success? Our goal today is to provide a useful and tested roadmap to professionals and project teams looking for information in this development strategy. We will share insight from our experience and hopefully set the stage for more engagements at the end of the presentation. So over the next hour, we will examine the basics of joint capital development. We will explore the intricacies of the process, the benefits, the challenges of these collaborations, the whys, the whens, and the hows of joint capital projects. We will look at real-world examples of successful projects, and then we will have an open forum for comments and questions. So without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to Matt to take it away from here. Thank you. Matt?
Much, Ugo. I appreciate the introduction. I'm glad we can set the tone with a good, clear definition. So welcome, everyone. Good morning, assuming you're local. Today, we're rethinking how we build. Joint capital developments bring together the public and private partnerships to co-develop infrastructure. This is all to maximize value, reduce redundancy, and deliver inclusive and sustainable spaces. It's important to think about this as one site with multiple benefits across stakeholders. When done right, joint builds align people, purpose, and places. So I wanted to start on the why. It's important to frame out why joint builds are the smart play. Well before we go into navigating the process, talking about success stories, or delving into projects we have actively on the go or have successfully delivered. So first, we want to highlight that joint builds tackle multiple needs with one investment. They're ideal for teams with tight budgets, restricted funding, and overlapping infrastructure demands. By pooling resources, we avoid duplicate facilities, soil decisions, and underused space. It's about smarter resource use, faster delivery, and infrastructure that actually fits the community. Fitting the community, that piece, I want to make sure I take a moment to frame out. We have a really good example that we'll talk about at the end as a part of our success stories and ongoing projects that we're excited to share. But this is a community hub being developed in the middle of a community. This community already has active projects going on, such as a residential housing development to the east of the project, an active park development happening to the north of the project. And the project that I'm actively managing and supporting right now complements all of those neighboring developments to provide facilities that not only the community needs for access to education, but also for recreation, public libraries in the evenings and weekends, and to really round out the community experience in that area beyond housing. So the way to build allows stakeholders to do more with less by sharing land, funding investment, design, and most importantly, and less often thought about, operational capacity. So building the case for these joint capital projects, there's many levers to whole lot for success, far too many to squeeze into a 1 hour conversation, but I want to make sure we take a moment to highlight really the three big ones, the three that we found have the most impact on the project when they are pulled. So 3 levels that drive success primarily is around shovel-ready projects first. These are fully scoped, funded projects, permitted. This means low risk and quick impact. Also, standardization. We're seeing more and more of this in a lot of projects coming down the pipeline. These projects utilize templates, modular designs, BIM technology to keep things consistent, fast, and cohesive. These modular designs are templated, off-the-shelf projects, many ways to describe them. They all offer one thing, and that's consistency, adaptability, and have already gone through the ringer of making sure they're compliant to Ontario Building Code or local building code more generally, and can really reduce a lot of that upfront legwork in pre-construction and planning, especially if you can fit it on a parcel of land that's already being thought about. To round this out, accountability. With clear roles and oversight, we get transparency and start trust from very start all the way through to the finish. This is arguably the most important lever, but these aren't in any particular order. So now that we've kind of understand what a joint build is, why it might be a good idea for these projects, and somewhat built the case and understanding around it, just to take a quarter step back, it's important to understand when to say yes to a joint build. Not every project qualifies. They are great when they make sense, but it's important to ask these questions up front. A couple of the questions that come to mind off the top is there a genuine need? Do all participants bring value? Think of land, funding, expertise, operational capacity, thinking beyond delivering the actual project and moving in after the ribbon's been cut. Also, is there community and political buy-in? This is a really, really important one, especially some of the projects I'm operating in now with such large community impact and excitement around the project. Finally, can partners commit beyond the ribbon cutting? This will be a common theme that I hope to highlight as many opportunities as possible throughout today's discussion. Everyone gets very excited about breaking ground and building a project and completing that capital exercise, but the operations after grand opening are equally important and much earlier in the project than you may anticipate. Use cases for these builds can include shared cultural hubs, job creating developments, and even sustainability efforts like solar farms. I think there's a lot of good opportunity, especially in the future, to add in a strong sustainability note in some of these existing developments. If no one partner can go it alone, but they can build something bigger together, then that's usually your signal that a joint build is the right fit for you. Ultimately, success in joint builds rests on strong collaboration, clear governance, shared funding models, and land use agreements, and planning for long-term ownership and operations. Before I dive into conditions for success, I want to touch on the long-term ownership operations piece, tie it back to a joint build where we're actively managing right now. Very excitingly towards the tail end, hoping to go live as soon as July, August, but it's a joint build development through 2 different school boards. And right now where we are in the project is looking at that operations piece, seeing how all these things are going to go together, and really just acknowledging the fruits of our labor up front and building these strategies and governance models, what feels like years ago, now coming to fruition, and we're actioning what this plan has been baked in as. So looking to the conditions for success, these are what thriving partnerships have in common. In supporting the delivery of collaborative municipal projects, joint schools, other community hubs, myself, and I know for a fact my colleagues as well, we've identified that great joint builds tend to share these common traits. There's a lot of conditions for success, but I think nearly all of them would include these 6. First one being shared goals. Of course, everyone needs to agree on an end game. In the early days and onset of the project, when the idea is first being created, agreement on an end game is certainly not in play, but needs to fall into place well before any commitments are made. All stakeholders also need to align on values, compatible visions and priorities, and really identifying that why and making sure everyone's kind of marching to the beat of the same drum on pursuing this project. Common facility needs is also a big one. Sharing makes sense in all of these collaborative models. This is all about doing more for less and leaning into that collaboration. And at the end of the day, sharing these facilities, understanding common space, as well as the independent operations within the facility needs to make sense. Also available resources. This may be a no-brainer at the front end, but capital, land, and talent all need to be in check, all need to be in place and well thought about far beyond or far before you start to break ground. Supportive governance, you'll hear a lot about today as well. Governance is a huge piece of it, but it also extends to authorities having jurisdiction, having buy-in, and roles being clear. These partnerships can really bring in immense value, especially prior to permits being issued for a project. And really encouraging collaboration in this space is going to point to success. And you'll realize that early. Finally, feasibility. Feasibility is a much more analytical metric, so to speak. It needs to be legally sound, financially viable, and operational ready. Even missing one of these can inhibit momentum. So vetting these early and often and thoroughly is incredibly important. Strong partnerships, it's important to note they don't happen by accident. They're built through clarity and trust. These are deliberate acts to get a deliberate outcome. And the deliberate outcome at this stage in the project is strong partnerships. So pitfalls are predictable, incredibly predictable. So it's important to plan for them. One of the best ways to plan is just to ask the right questions and think about them. 50% of the problem being solved is just understanding and identifying the problem. That's half the battle. So being honest, joint builds are complex. So we want to identify what could possibly go wrong. Goals shift, interests clash, communications can certainly break down throughout the project. Permits can get messy, as I'm sure anyone with even a little bit of experience on this call would know. Funding can fall through and community pushback can also happen at various stages throughout the project, and these need to be planned for and thought about. Post-build, also an important one. If anyone's unclear on who is responsible for what, there needs to be a fix in place, hopefully thought about well before. Front-loading expectations is incredibly important. Locking down responsibilities and building conflict resolution into the DNA of your project is the biggest kind of takeaway that we hope to get across today. Building conflict resolution into the DNA of the project. That's what joint builds are all about. The good news is all these issues are predictable and they're manageable with the right planning. Well, as Ugo alluded to before, Colliers operates all across the country. A lot of our work and those on the call and panelists today operate in Ontario, but we've built community across the country. And we've found success, and really our core mantra and value we add to a lot of these projects is controlling the chaos with structure. Structure is the best way to manage risk efficiently and can be the biggest value add to planning these projects out. What managing risk efficiently can look like is using tools such as memorandums of understanding or project charters, really just to get all these stakeholders aligned. Again, this is a joint build. There's multiple parties, likely haven't worked together in the past, and these memorandums of understanding can really tie unity across the team early. Also building in conflict resolution frameworks, as we mentioned before, but assigning compliance leads to stay on top of regulations is another core component. These regulations vary drastically between projects, and each project has different considerations on what needs to be considered through regulations to even get it off the ground. Key examples being updated reference plans, updated easements, and zoning are all key requirements far before land purchase agreements. Regulations can also go the way of any sort of permitting and compliance within the area. Engaging communities to build support is another excellent way to manage risk proactively and just bring people along for the journey. Even if they aren't a core stakeholder, keeping them informed can provide a lot of value downstream if conversations do need to be brought up. Nailing down post-build operations in the design phase. This is, again, thinking about operations early. During the design phase, you have all the opportunity in the world to bring these things into the design, think about them in a very intelligent and deliberate way to make sure they're planned for when that ribbon does get cut, everything's just in place. And finally, to lean on third-party facilitators, such as callers, to keep momentum and build trust and make sure this framework is effective for your project. So wrapping up section one, before we get into navigating the process and looking at some of our success stories, I hope this message has driven home that the future of infrastructure is collaborative, especially what we're seeing in the market. Joint builds from today's conversation should not be seen as a workaround. They should be seen as a better way forward. Again, being able to do more for less. They're efficient, they're inclusive, and they're durable when they're done right. With a shared vision and strong structure, we can build infrastructure that truly reflects our communities and stands the test of time. Again, these bring together people, places, and processes that are stronger when combined. And if we're going to take away anything from today's message, for myself anyway, is that a great build starts and ends with collaboration. And it's important that collaboration's at both ends. Back to Ugo. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Matt. That was really good. Joint builds are the smart way to maximize value with careful thought and planning. We've explored various facets of this diamond, if I may call it that, and understanding what joint builds are and when to deploy the strategy. We have considered the potential pitfalls and how to manage these to achieve the desired results. However, what do these issues and relationships look like in the trenches of actual implementation, from the project planning phase to post-construction phases of operations and facility management? I'll invite Ron to continue the discussion. Ron?
Thank you, Ugo. Yeah, Matt, that was very good. I'm going to concentrate on process and procedure, governance at the front end, and I'll also chat a little bit about operational aspects at the back end. So the first slide is about aligning yourself during the pre-construction phase. And I guess the importance of this slide is to set up a decision-making structure so that all the stakeholders are well represented. And this is all part of the governance. Typically, this is done through agreements between all the parties so that the parties are aligned. Matt mentioned a charter. A charter is also part of the agreement. But a significant part of the agreement is to make sure that everybody's interests are well represented and everybody has an opportunity to provide input into specifically what their objectives are for the project. Now, part of the whole process involves getting permits, as Matt mentioned, how to resolve conflicts. But the most important thing about governance is that everybody is well represented. Some of the examples we're going to show you are a combination of a couple of school boards, combination of a couple of school boards in a municipality, and each one of them, once again, has their own expectations from the project, and that's what we want to capture in this endeavor. Next slide, please. So establishing the foundation. Again, we have to define the scope of work, and this all comes at the front end in the agreements. And some of the examples we're going to show you, there are very early agreements. There'd be an umbrella agreement, which is a broad agreement that basically just identifies that we've got a certain number of partners, and the certain number of partners at a very high level want to achieve certain objectives, such as program, cost, and any other items. So we're going to identify that. Once we can establish that, then what we've done is we've established the parameters for each of the partners. And the parameters, once again, are going to be controlled by this framework, which we call governance. And we know that school boards, as well as municipalities, for example, and anybody else, generally runs on a governance model. Ultimately, the governance model is set up to ensure that decisions are made and everybody is part of each decision along the way. Now, of course, within that, we have roles. We're going to have significant milestones, and we're always talking about budgets. Next slide, please. So it comes back down to accountability, governance, accountability. They all have to be thought of together. We talk about scope of work, 01 here, which is scope of work. We're going to create a schedule. And within that schedule, we have the pathways to getting approvals. And of course, getting decisions. I keep talking about decisions because I know that people who are listening in on this know that all this is all about getting decisions made in the appropriate manner. We also know that in many instances, these decisions have to go to committees, and the committees run on certain cycles, monthly cycles. And we want to make sure that we incorporate that into this whole process so that your culture is reflected in how we're running this joint venture. Next slide, please. This is a slide about planning. And we all know that to get a project right, we have to spend 80% of the time up front to make sure that the project is planned properly. If we get the planning right, the project's going to go well. If we don't get the planning right, we're going to have bigger challenges down the road, which we're trying to avoid. We get involved with early planning discussions on maintenance, who's responsible for different aspects of the building, because now we have a shared use building. We're probably going to be sharing the mechanical system. Likely we're going to be sharing the electrical system, and we're going to be sharing other aspects. So we have to decide, what's the shared responsibility for maintaining during the operational period of the building. We could be looking at 25 to 50 years for these buildings. Coordinating furniture and furnishings, we're going to probably be sharing some furnishings and some of the shared use spaces. We've got to integrate that into the whole aspect of the project. And then security, joint operations, school recess times, for example, how's that all coordinated? How are different activities like tournaments coordinated? And of course, the feedback loop is going to be on an ongoing basis, a committee structure whereby we're going to learn as we're going, and we can import areas for improvement. Next slide, please.
Great. So there is a lot to consider.
Back to you, Ugo.
Thank you, Ron. There is a lot to consider, even basic things like who's responsible for getting the snow off the lot. In each project phase, from planning through implementation, execution, and of course, post completion. It's complicated, and it calls for a shared vision and a resolve to achieve the established project goals. In this next section, through the lens of 3 real-world case studies of recently completed and ongoing joint builds, where Colliers is supporting school boards and municipalities in delivering their joint capital projects, we will share some examples of successful joint builds at various stages of completion. So, Ron, back to you.
Thank you. So, what does success look like? Well, we want it to be inclusive, of course. We want to also be ready for operations. We know that the buildings, these are typically built in 2 to 4 years, but we also know that they're going to operate for 25 to 50 years. Again, we want to continue to ensure that we have strong relationships and trust amongst the partners through the life cycle of the building, from the start of design to when the building is finally deemed to be not ready anymore, but that's 50 years down the road. So we don't have to talk about that anymore. And user experience, It's a progressive thing. We want to continue to monitor if the space needs are being met, excuse me. For example, maybe one of the partners doesn't need as much space as the building runs through its life cycle, but we want to make sure that we optimize the rest of the space. So the building has to be adaptable during its life cycle. And finally, I keep coming back to governance. We want to make sure that decisions are timely, fair, there's transparency in the decisions, and the relationship amongst the partners continues to be strong. Next slide, please. So here's an example, Canoe Landing. Canoe Landing was a combined adventure between City of Toronto, Toronto District School Board, and the Toronto Catholic District School Board. We combined 2 elementary schools, as well as daycare, recreation, and other park facilities in downtown Toronto, in the City Place neighborhood. As well, we also had a parking structure underneath the building. So we had basically, I'm going to call it 4 stakeholders. And we had to come up with a program that accommodated the objectives for each of the stakeholders in an urban setting, again, in downtown Toronto. We set up a governance structure very early so that all the partners are represented. Collier's role was as the project manager for the project. The partners, quite honestly, felt the project was pretty complicated. They couldn't come up to an agreement on who would manage it. So they chose to get a third-party project management firm to deliver the project as their project manager. And fortunately, it was Collier's. The project was delivered in 5 years. I'm assuming that maybe some people have seen the project. It was a highly sustainable project too. You can see in the image here, there's a green roof, the basketball court on the roof. There was an adjacent park that we need to arrange for sharing amongst the school boards and the city. We optimized all the spaces. The gymnasiums are used 100% of the time. The park is used 100% of the time. The parking garage, when it's not used for school, is used by the municipality, and it's paid parking, especially during the weekends when there's baseball games or activities down at Rogers Center. So I think it's a pretty successful example of how to optimize needs to deliver high value for your money. Thank you, Ugo.
Matt will take us through the process on the Caledonia Joint School. Matt?
Thanks, Ugo. Not talking on mute, not me. So it's a really great development. I alluded to it earlier in the conversation. Before I dive into any of the details from this build, I do just want to make a quick callback to when we were talking about execution, especially in my role, and I can imagine Ugo's as well. A lot of the upfront work we do in planning involves a heavy amount of cautious optimism, I'll say, throughout the project. And it's really not until the execution phase you truly figure out how successful you were or how effective you were. So calling back to that execution phase, I just want to highlight that execution should, and in the case of Caledonia, does feel like a well-rehearsed playbook. And this just really speaks to our planning and optimization at the front end. Our changes, there was many of them. They were controlled. Our governance was already mapped and leveraged and utilized throughout every corner and change and revision of path forward on this project. And the accountability, there was no gray areas. We knew our stakeholders, we knew our key players, we knew who to keep informed and who to keep advised throughout the entire process, and most importantly, who to go to for approvals. This project was no different from anyone else. That the execution of the project, which I'm actively in the middle of right now, is absolutely no time for new processes or surprise decisions. We're sticking to what's being agreed upon and staying course, which has served us extremely well in this. The school development we have on screen right now is a joint development. The parties are the Brant Haldimand Norfolk Catholic District School Board and the Grand Erie District School Board. They've engaged in a much needed development that'll include a childcare center as well as the 2 elementary schools. These will be home to approximately 740 students, consolidated into a single building, just under 80,000 square feet. The new joint build also includes your shared facilities and is kind of maximizing the value that we went through at the front end of this presentation. The school facility includes shared spaces. These shared spaces, while common in schools, are common really across the board, being gymnasiums, change rooms, and libraries. The shared space or common space across these 2 stakeholders is totaling about 21,000 square feet and is all being delivered in the next couple of months, which is great. Colliers started on this project way back in April of 2022, and we've been providing full project management services. Just give you some insight into the structure of this. It's just a dual partnership. The Brant Haldimand Catholic School Board is what we call the active partner. During the open discussion, I hope to find some time to talk about really just some of the important questions to ask on who the players are and how they're identified, maybe an active player versus a passive partner, tying these names to things like land agreements or simply signing off on a change order. It's important to understand when you have multiple stakeholders who's accountable to what and how you navigate that process. Ugo, next slide. Thank you. So this is the joint build we were talking about earlier in today's conversation. This build is what was made an example of when I was speaking to the park development and the community housing development. While you can't see it in this render, this is surrounded by a now complete housing development to the east, which is kind of up on the page. They're very near completion, but we're actively engaged with them seemingly week over week just to make sure these 2 parties are playing well together and the shared boundaries are being efficient and well utilized. This is also to the north of the project where the park development was also happening. But the meat and the potatoes of it and what we're focused on and what we're developing and managing actively is exactly what you see on screen. It's a multi-stakeholder development. Where we are in the project right now is well broken ground, a lot of ground improvement work, starting to talk about footings and foundation more these days as we figure out geopiers and really deal with the wetness this weather brought us from the past winter. But the stakeholders on this project are several. So we have the City of Brantford, we have the Brantford Public Library, as well as the Grand Erie District School Board, once again on this one as well. They're engaging in a much needed joint build development project that includes an elementary school that'll be home to about 650 students, a recreation complex, which you can kind of see right in the middle there, as well as a joint use library that has that beautiful curvature right at the front of the building towards the south, as well as a childcare center. This is located in Southwest Shellard in Brantford and is just over 100,000 square feet. So it's a large facility. The school will share the space with the library and gymnasium during school hours based on the agreement much earlier in this project. And Colliers started this project in January of 2022. And again, is providing full project management services. Happy to open up to questions, open forum, but back to you, Ugo.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was really, really good. We've covered a lot of ground in our presentation today, starting with a basic understanding of what joint capital developments are and ramping up to the opportunities and complexities of collaborative developments across all phases. And now we would like to invite you to join the conversation. Rory, who has been in the trenches of some joint build projects himself, has a few questions to share, some perspective, and kick off the discussions. Rory?
Hey, thanks, Ugo. And looking at time, I'm not going to spend too much time on, asking the group questions because we want to have an open forum here and give you opportunity. But as you can tell, this whole presentation was about questions. We manage process with questions. Our experience tells us We need to ask questions, but we need to ask the right questions. So for your consideration, which joint entity is actually purchasing the property? Whose name is on title? That's pretty important, especially for site plan approval agreements. Do you need multi-party agreements, not only between the joint parties, but with your delivery folks, your designers, your contractors? What kind of agreements need to be in place for your developers? How do you ensure financial transparency and equitable allocation in financial management between all parties? That's a mouthful. Try doing it in real life. It's even tougher. How do we manage differential growth in the future? What if you need to do an addition in the future? That's pretty important to talk about at the front. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. If joint build projects brings communities together, would collaborative delivery models be of interest and enhance that success? On a side note, we are doing workshops across Ontario on collaborative delivery models. So if you're interested, reach out. But the message being, the better you work together, the better product you'll have in the end. And this is what joint delivery is all about. Over to you, Ugo.
Thanks, Rory. You do have a question that hits one of the notes you were talking about. And someone is asking, for the last few projects shown, could you detail the construction delivery method?
Okay. Did you want me to tackle this, or maybe I'll pass it over to Ron and Matt, who were involved in the projects? Maybe
Yes,
we'll start with
I think
Ron.
so.
Yeah, okay, sure. Thank you. So for Canoe Landing, it was design, bid, build. Matt?
For both these projects, and incredibly common for any project that certainly involves a school, is design, bid, build. These are all CCDC2 contracts. They've all operated the same way, but this kind of dovetails into the perfect point in the conversation where it actually made me question if Sandy was a paid actor with this question, because we do want to also talk about other delivery models, collaborative delivery models. Today's theme was collaboration. I think it's all we've talked about. I probably used that word enough times that it's starting to sound funny to me. But collaborative delivery models are currently less common in this space, but something Colliers has been doing more and more of that personally I'd love to see applied to these types of projects more often. While not currently the case, something like a progressive design build model can certainly add additional value, show additional value, and sometimes be a more efficient route, especially through the lens of collaboration. But maybe to speak a little bit more on that, I'll hand it back to our subject matter expert to add some color as well.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I see Sandy's updated comment being, I was not expecting this to be a CCDC2. The STIP sum delivery model does give us opportunity to do checks and balances along the way before we plunge into construction. But I'd say all of us on this panel are definitely open and a supporter of a more collaborative model to maybe accelerate schedule, have more focus on budget, and have more of a team function as opposed to contractual sides delivering.
And I think if I can add to Rory regarding that, we're finding more and more of our clients on a project by project basis want Colliers to come on board very early to, I'll say, run a workshop discussion on what would be the most appropriate delivery model based on their project. Going back to what Matt and Rory were saying, we're seeing more and more progressive design build for the reasons that number one, we can get more transparency into the process very early, and get more certainty into what we could look at for the cost of the project, especially with all the uncertainty going on in the world these days. As well as we can get the building built faster, which also saves money because we can avoid some escalation. So that's a service that we provide at Colliers, and we're seeing more and more clients say, let's just bring you on board. Let's just take a look at that to start with so that we can start developing a project plan.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Matt. I want to thank everyone. Yeah.
Sorry, I see we have 10 minutes left. I'm just trying to figure out timing here. We do have another 2 questions.
Okay.
If we can squeeze in, I think they're pretty good questions. But
good.
maybe if you want to just pull them up, we can quickly check them off. Any other questions in the chat? Ugo will show you how to get a hold of us on the screen here, but back to you, Ugo.
Okay, great. We have a question here. Someone's asking, the main factor, as I understand, the main factor that can prevent or solve all pitfalls of communication. What is the difference of what are the different communication processes or approaches in joint projects compared to other types? Was it different? We do have another question about what happens when a stakeholder no longer needs their part of the shared facilities or spaces.
Take a stab at the first one. I have a key example that is quite unique to joint build specifically and comes up every single project, and it's almost a living methodology on how we approach these things. But communication is always critical. Every single project, joint build or not, it is arguably the most important piece of the entire pie. What's unique for communication structure in joint build is really understanding the stakeholders, understanding who wants to know, who needs to know, who doesn't want to know is kind of a key component of it. And it needs to be representative in your monthly meetings, your biweekly touch points, your designer knowing who to reach out to. Overall facilitation of the product needs to understand who to go to for what, I think, is a big piece of the communication structure. Simply knowing who to go to is a big challenge, especially on these larger builds. A key example of this communication structure as well is putting together kind of a communication framework. And I'll pick on an example such as something as simple as a change order. Understanding the difference between the contract authority and signing authority for the project, but other stakeholders as well, they all need to be communicated to for any given change order. Having that kind of document and agreement in place, understanding I actually need signatures from these people, but I also need email approvals or phone calls with these people for awareness to all approve this contract amendment is an important piece. And it certainly gets a lot more complicated in a joint build. It can be complicated in other projects, but here it's very critical to understand up front. But I'll hand it over to Rory or Ron if you have other key examples.
Well, I think there's a two-part question.
Yeah.
I'll try to stay in the first part. First part is exactly what you said, Matt. And quite honestly, yeah, you've got partners now. Everybody's got to behave. So, and if you have somebody who doesn't behave, then the other partners tell them they got to behave. And it's as simple as that. I don't know how else to put it. Now, when you get the change orders, sometimes one of the partners will trigger a change order, and they're the only ones who are going to benefit from it. That's why you want to have a third-party facilitator, like a project manager, who can facilitate that sort of a thing so that everybody understands. Somebody wants a better floor and they're part of the facility and they're the only ones who are going to get the benefit, they'll pay for it, right? And that becomes ongoing, communicating and ongoing behavioral patterns to make sure it works out. And so that's kind of how you address that. On the second part of the question about, if I understand correctly, Hugo, was it about if a partner said, what happens if I want to get out of the arrangement? Is that what the question was?
Yeah, or you don't need your part or some parts of your part.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, quite honestly, nothing's perfect, right? Like this is a good arrangement, but you have to write in the agreement. And that's when the lawyers get involved in writing the agreement, that in the event that one of the partners wants to back out of I'll call it the arrangement, what's the mechanism, right? And that's something that everybody discusses at the front end. And yes, that's always a risk, okay? That some partner at one point may not get the benefit they wanted to get out of it, and they want to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something you write in the agreement. And I'm hoping that everybody's going to be optimistic that they'll try to make the relationship work. Anyways, Rory, if you want to add to it, you can.
Yeah, I'll just close that with Matt's project example about the Southwest Community Center started with the group approaching us how to structure an operational agreement. And that was one of the main questions. What if I wanted to expand or contract? How do we deal with that? And it started with, well, who's actually putting ownership on title, and how are we structuring the ownership in the agreement? But Ron's absolutely right. It's day one conversations. It goes in the structure of the agreement, and that's your roadmap for the entire project. You start looking at what happens in the future and at the end, at the start, and that will increase your chance for success.
Absolutely,
Ugo.
Rory. Thank you. Absolutely. It's all about what happens at the beginning, the partners you have at the table, and the agreements that you structure. The more planning you're able to get up front, the more successful your project will be. The more questions you ask, the more scenarios you throw into the discussion, the more success you're likely to have at the end of it. And of course, it stays flexible. And when you have a shared goal, we want to achieve this. This is what we want, success at the end. And we understand a clear picture of what that success looks like, then we're likely to arrive at that goal. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. We hope the webinar has been useful for you. We hope we've provided some answers and set the tone for further discussions on this important topic. Joint capital development is a deep and multifaceted concept that presents challenges that can be as unique as the different participating stakeholders or the different projects. If you have questions or you're considering a collaborative approach to your next capital project, or you'd like to chat some more about what this could look like, please reach out to us. Our details are on the screen. You could also drop your email in the chat and we will reach out to you. Colliers would like to thank Ron and OECM for organizing this webinar and consistently providing a platform for engaging conversations that facilitate learning and development in the industry. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
so
you,
much,
Ugo,
everyone.
Matt, Rory, and Ron for your valuable insights. I hope today's session has given everyone a deeper understanding of the process, the benefits, and how Colliers can guide you through it, supported by real-life success stories. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Wishing you all a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronald. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.